Hello folks, and welcome to the Wasteland. A vibrant, nuclear polluted hellscape full of some of the most ruthless pirates, raiders, and bandits, as well as super mutants that the world has to offer. It is also home to some of the most majestic, mutated, mutilated creatures you will ever lay eyes upon, such as myself. That's right, friendo, the name is Meat, and I am a Deathclaw, a stupid, sexy Deathclaw, and even better, a sentient one at that. That's right, baby, I'm a lost experiment. I've been given sentience, and I'm getting the hell off this planet. Just like all good things, humans have ruined this planet with their petty wars, and as you can see, they've turned the entire place into a radioactive hellscape. The planet may have changed, but there is one thing that never changes: humanity. Wait, no, I think the line is war. Anyways, ways off this planet's surface and into the stars quite literally don't just fall from the sky, so for the time being, while we're trying to plan out our escape of how the hell to get off this rock, we're going to need to cut down some trees to build ourselves a little shelter. We picked a nice clear spot next to this little mountain here that was oddly smooth and looked kinda... Oh, it's an ancient danger! Would you look at that? Normally, these types of structures from the old world would have some useful types of machines and or equipment inside, so we decided to break through one of the walls. After bursting through the wall though, I noticed that there appears to be some extra structure on the inside. A vault-tech door. Using my large, fumbling claws, I would pry the door apart and enter what appears to be some type of living space. Long since abandoned, I take it. Hard to say exactly what happened to the occupants, but as I began exploring more, I think I ended up finding one of them. A handsome, rotting man in a nice blue vault suit with what appears to may have been beautiful golden locks at one point. Not so much now. He doesn't appear to have any wounds that we could see, although he has been decomposing for quite some time. If I had to guess, he's probably locked himself away in here and starved to death. On the bright side, I do suppose that means he won't be needing this humble little abode anymore, and we can claim it for ourselves. Our very own vault, all for a Deathclaw. Oh, the irony. I must say I am plumb tickled pink, though, that we ended up finding this little teeny vault here, as it is going to be much safer for us to rest in at night. Even for a Deathclaw, the wasteland can be pretty dangerous, as one might imagine. I gathered up some of the remaining wood that we had cut down and started building myself a nice warm fire inside here. I would be able to turn the lights on, but I'm still pretty unfamiliar with power production as a large death-clawed creature, but a nice cozy fire to keep us warm all night long will have to suffice, I suppose. I suppose it's true, as the old saying goes, one man's starvation inside their own vault is another man's, home sweet home treasure. Dude, I really gotta get rid of that corpse. He smells terrible. We took his carcass outside the very next morning to let him air out a bit. As you can see, he's a little gassy. Man, oh man, that smell of all that rotting corpse has really got my appetite going. Not really, but I am hungry. Very hungry. Looks like it's time for a little bit of a hunting trip, eh? Thankfully, the wasteland is always packed full of some mutated beast for us to hunt, and my hands are quite literally deadly weapons. My claws make it extremely easy to rip a deer carcass in half so I may feast upon the ooey gooey insides. Now that I have a full tummy, I can start cleaning up this shit show on the inside, like all the corpse bile and rubble. Just because I'm a Deathclaw doesn't mean I don't have standards. And since it seems like we're going to be living here for quite a while, I don't really want to have to deal with any of the unsightly, grotesque views that we have been dealing with. This world is grotesque enough, that doesn't mean that our dwelling needs to be the same. Speaking of which, as time was passing, starving and we were just trying to survive at this point, hunting and things like that, I eventually noticed that there was a nearby ancient structure, probably some type of factory for producing old world tanks and other war weapons, or maybe Mr. Handies, I'm not really sure. But of course we began to think that they might have something useful there to help us in our end goal of getting the hell off this mutated, disgusting rock, so we started heading that way. On our way there, though, it would seem that we've been ambushed by raiders. In particular, though, it appeared that it was only one singular raider with a pipe rifle. Nothing we couldn't handle, I'm sure, about as strong as a Brahmin. As we approached one another in the night, my thick, scaly skin would do me many a favor against those pathetic bullets, and with my claws I would rip and tear until eventually she hit the ground. Defeated in a pool of her own blood, she pathetically, but also maybe courageously, tried to begin crawling away from me. As I towered over her, a beast of destruction, I thought, that's kind of impressive, and so I decided to spare her life. Maybe she could be my little plaything or something. Either way, by morning, we were headed towards the ancient structure once more, making our way there, finally arriving some odd hours later. An incredibly large place reminds me of the facility that I was experimented on. Sad. Alright, my little plaything, here's the deal. I'm going to go into that ancient structure, and you are going to stay right here where you are. And if you don't, I will track you down and I will rip you into about 50 or so pieces. Okay. It would seem there are some vicious packs of feral dogs all around, but if you ask me, I think that's just more eaten. Now, finally making my way towards the structure, I use my claws to rip these disgusting, mangy mutts into about 100 different pieces and quickly killed them. Finally, time for a snack. I have been absolutely starving. Nothing like a little bit of dog chow. Oh, am I right? Ever so quickly, I began prying apart all the doors and heading into what appears to be an ancient factory before the bombs dropped on this pathetic little world. They had some resources inside, like different types of textiles and medicines, but there was nothing all that interesting, I must say. As night began to fall, I gathered up some wood outside and built my little pet and myself a nice warm fire to keep us cozy all night long. We got some much needed shut-eye, and she would also be in a contained room so I could make sure she didn't sneak off. The following day, I ended up searching throughout the rest of the factory, and I found some other things like stem packs and textiles and fuel and yada yada yada, but nothing really notable, so we began heading back home. My little pet wasn't too keen on wanting to leave, but after a few words of encouragement, like saying I'll eat your heart, she was ready to go, and eventually we would arrive back home. Welcome to your new dwelling, my little friend. Feel free to make yourself at home, build yourself a nest, or whatever it is your species does. I'm still not all that sure on the details, to be honest with you. I must say our new bandit companion was almost like my very own personal dolly, so I decided to take off her mercenary outfit and put her in some much more fitting attire. Ah, there she is. Who would have known that blue and yellow was your color? I did. I knew that. If you're gonna be living in a vault, you gotta look the part, sister, and you definitely do now. For a time, things were pretty darn boring. We didn't have much going on. We had some wild animals attack us, of course, but thanks to my large Deathclaw figure and stature and claws in general, we were easily taking care of them. But something interesting did end up happening. Well, a ship to get us off-world. I suppose I was wrong earlier on when I said a way off this planet doesn't just fall from the sky, because that's quite literally what just happened. It would appear this AI has landed a ship on the west coast of the world, which is a little bit of a problem because we are much closer to the east coast, and it looks like it's going to be about a month's journey or so. Why is this a problem? Well, we don't currently have near enough food to make that journey without starving. Looks like we'll need to start prepping for that. To begin, I'm going to start chopping up some of the wild animals, and we'll let our little pet bandit here go about cooking us some meals for the journey. But food won't be the only problem. As mentioned, the wasteland is incredibly dangerous dangerous, so I am going to be wearing some metal armor. I know, don't get me wrong now, I know my skin is very beautiful and also very tough, but having some metal over top of that makes me even tougher. But before we could set out on our journey, we ended up having a group of super mutants coming to slaughter us. Looks like it's a good thing we put the armor on. I know these beasts aren't exactly known for their intelligence, but do they really think that 4 of them could take us out? I highly doubt they'll have a chance. The group of green giants began making their way towards our home. I decided to take the lead on this and let our bandit companion stand behind me, firing over my shoulder or underneath my gigantic leathery arms. This tactic was working absolute wonders, and eventually we had ended up killing half of the squad of mutants. One of them even dropped us a pretty little present. Thanks to my brute strength, this large piece of rebar with a giant piece of concrete on the end would be perfect for bashing in heads. Specifically the soft and squishy heads of the remaining super mutants in the area looking to do us harm. Since they weren't coming to us, we would have to come to them, and we quickly did so and beat their brains out, and yeah, so we ended up killing them actually, except for one of them. This one though, not so lucky. This one here though that we beat down a few moments ago, going by the name of Seth, which is actually a pretty normal name all things considered, was very lucky and would not be beaten to death by us. Good job, Seth. It's your lucky day. We quickly took him back to the vault and chucked him into the teeny tiny little room where we would actually start trying to recruit him. Now here's the fun part. Since super mutants aren't all that intelligent, and when they see a large Deathclaw that could easily rip them apart, they would actually be willing to join us pretty quickly. In other words, Seth joined us. Hi, Seth. I must say, it's nice not being the only large towering monster around humans anymore. Besides having Seth here on our side with his also leathery skin and large, powerful muscles, we should be pretty good to go to make our journey towards the ship. Let's do that. The very next morning, we would set out with all of our meals and other resources and items in tow, heading for the ship. In the meantime, back home, we ended up having yet another group, though this one much larger, of super mutants coming to attack us. Luckily for us, we were already gone, and unlucky for them. They did end up completely destroying our little makeshift base though, so maybe that'll satisfy them, I don't know. Now, the only option that we really had was for us to abandon our old home, which we would quickly end up doing. Not really a big deal, as we didn't plan on going back there, and it has served its purpose. However, abandoning our old base for whatever reason seems to have upset the NCR. Now, as to why they even care, or possibly if this is just them now detecting us, I don't know, but they are really mad at us, and looks like they're going to try to kill us at some point. Here's hoping that we're well off this planet before that happens. There is a little issue with that, as most of the territories out west also appear to be controlled by the NCR, as well as plenty of super mutant factions. A more pressing issue, though, that we're currently faced with is the fact that we are currently starving. Looks like we didn't account for the fact that we were going to be bringing Seth along with us. Thankfully, we would end up encountering a caravan of wastelanders who were looking to do some trading with us. We could purchase food from them, or so I thought. It looks like they don't want to buy anything from us, even though they do have a great big juicy Brahmin that we could eat, but we have no way to pay for it. Unfortunately for them, when faced with starvation or violence for food, we have to choose violence. Strangely, they didn't appear to be hostile towards us, even though we were attacking them. I just thought they hadn't seen us yet and we could ambush them. When we did this though, they still didn't really fight back. Perhaps they're surrendering, or they're just a group of pacifists. Either way, looks like we're free to take their Brahmin. Now then, with hunting season over and we finally have some meat to fill our bellies, as well as some agave fruit that is somehow growing in between all these radioactive fields, we can finally set up camp here for about a day or so and start cooking enough meals for the rest of our travels, which we would end up doing. Once completed, it was finally time for us to head back out once more. Our travels would take many another day and week and so on and so forth, and as we finally approached the ship, we had an ambush again. Oddly enough, it wasn't the NCR, nor bandits, nor super mutants, but it was actually just a couple of man-hunting rad scorpions. Nothing we couldn't handle, I thought. As they approached in the rainy night, Alice and Seth began firing at them as I came to crush them like the pathetic arthropods that they are. But after a few stings, I ended up feeling a little woozy. This was less than ideal, but thanks to Seth's pipe shotgun, we ended up blasting the little bastard into next week, and we were good. I'm very glad that we ended up keeping him instead of murdering him. These rad scorpions were looking absolutely delicious and would be perfect food for the few remaining days of travel we have left. Real quick though, guys, before we butcher them, could we maybe start tending to my wounds? My blood is starting to feel like cottage cheese. Once I was finally back on my feet, we made the last little trek to the landed ship, arriving shortly thereafter, and it was just as described, a landed ship. Time to start this little red wagon and to get the hell out of here, of course. Well, there was just one little issue, and most of you probably already know, but in case there's any newcomers here, the ship takes about 15 days or so to power up, and in doing so, it is going to let out a signal that will be detectable by everyone. Super mutants, the NCR, manhunting groups of rad scorpions and toxic animals, yada yada yada. So basically, we're going to need to defend ourselves for that long. I am still a bit injured, so perhaps I should use up one of those stim packs to kind of get me back in action a little bit faster. We would also begin spending the first day or so cutting down a lot of trees in the near area, trying to collect as much wood as possible so we could set up a little bit of a camp, and we could also set up some defenses as well. But before we had the chance to set up said defenses, we had an attack from the NCR. It would appear that they had sent many a trooper our way, making good on their promise from earlier to try to hunt us down and finish us off for whatever we did, I guess. As they approached our camp and the ship, we wasted no time engaging them, trying to keep them from damaging the ship itself, bashing in the head of one trooper while the others fired at us. We immediately began attempting to take cover in some nearby ruins, hoping that this would help us keep them from shooting us between the eyes. As our bandit was hiding, Seth and I would finish off those remaining, and once they were dead, the rest would attempt to flee the area. No doubt they'll definitely be back though, and in much larger numbers. Now, something interesting about the NCR is the fact that they brought even better gear that we could use. In particular, our little pet bandit would end up equipping one of the nice warm coats that one of the troopers were wearing. This might seem pretty trivial, but we were right in the midst of fall and it was getting very cold, so much so that we were afraid she was going to be hypothermic, and of course this coat would stop that. As well, we could of course make some ourselves, but the problem is waste leather isn't near as warm. Speaking of our bandit though, unfortunately she would end up getting an infection in her right leg. We immediately began tending to this as we couldn't let our little plaything that we had grown so fond of so quickly die. As we were waiting around to see if this infection would rot her leg off, or if we would have to remove it with our viciously sharp claws, she ended up also getting muscle parasites. Alice, you poor thing. You just can't catch a break, huh? Try not to die over there. And while she was trying not to die for the next few days, we would go about collecting plenty of berries and also doing a bit of hunting with the wildlife in the area to feed everyone. However, berries are not the only thing that we had been collecting, as all the wood we had chopped down was finally ready to be used for some proper defenses like barricades. These should give us a good bit of cover during the coming raids. By this point, Alice would finally develop an immunity to the infection in her legs, and now she can get off her lazy ass and start helping us build more defenses, such as some wooden spike traps. Since we haven't bothered, nor do we really possess the intelligence, other than Alice, but she is a slave and thus she cannot perform research to go about researching any projects, I cannot express how crucial these wooden spike traps would be in the coming weeks. But I think watching them in action kill quite a few raiders as well as course, one being a glowing ghoul raider, really speaks for itself, eh? By this point, we had been here for about a week or so. I'm not really sure, but I do know that it finally started snowing and was getting very, very cold, so we didn't want to sleep on the ground anymore. We ended up using a lot of the wood in the area to build ourselves a proper shelter, turning this frozen wasteland hell into a frozen wasteland home. A nice cozy place for us to sleep at night outside of the elements, as well as a nice table and chairs to eat our meals and to spend some time together. As we continued waiting for the ship to finally power up, we ended up having a lot of manhunter packs, which was the vast majority of the battles I think that we were dealing with. Now, I didn't want to bore you guys too much with a lot of that, but we also had quite a few fights that was mostly raiders and bandits, as well as super mutants. And during one of these particular fights with super mutants, things didn't exactly go to plan. As we had engaged in a firefight with a few of them, one of them with a pipe shotgun blasted Alice right between the eyes, killing her instantly. She had made it so far on this journey with us, and we were only a few days out from the ship powering up. Gone too soon. We quickly took our vengeance by smashing the bastard into a fine wasabi-like paste onto the ground, but even our revenge would not fix the grief that we had felt for her. We would quickly give her a burial not too far away from our base. And then, a few days later, we actually dug her up and started eating her because I'm a Deathclaw, for God's sake, and she was our pet thing, slave, whatever. Look, we liked her, we really grew fond of her, but we need food, okay? Besides, I'm sure Alice would understand if she wasn't dead, and also I hadn't already swallowed her head. These battles had also come at a cost for us as well. As you can see, Seth had lost many of his fingers, and I actually had a permanent gunshot to my right eye, but other than that, we were a-okay. And finally, slowly but surely, my friends, we have made our way to the ship powering up in several more hours, but we're almost off this damn dirty rock. We had planned on spending our last final hours doing some luxurious activities like sleeping the rest of the day that remains away, maybe playing the game of a board game, as well as some horseshoes, and just trying to have fun. Oh, great. Looks like the NCR isn't quite finished with us. This is odd because we hadn't had a raid from them in so long. It looks like though they've been preparing some of their forces. They had many a trooper along with him, as well as several veteran rangers, some of which were actually wearing power armor and oddly enough had equipped some miniguns. This wouldn't be easy, but if we wait them out, I think we could just run away. But for whatever reason, Seth here decided that he wanted to play the hero, and he wanted to hold them off as I made my grand escape. I actually tricked him into doing so. I told you those super mutants were very intelligent, didn't I? I quickly rushed to one of the pods, hopping in and sealing myself inside. Good luck, Seth. Now, not to worry, as we did leave a secret weapon up Seth's sleeve, a doomsday rocket launcher, a nice little reward that we achieved from one of our previous fights. Don't worry, Seth, you got this, buddy, hell yeah. Well, now that's just unfortunate. Good try, though, Seth. You almost had him there, buddy. Funny enough, though, I think he really did buy us enough time, as it looks like the reactor is finally powered up. Time for us to get the hell out of here. See you later. Boy, howdy there, friendos. Just wanted to pop in at the end of the video and say thank you ever so much for watching today's video. I do truly hope that you have enjoyed. This has been a hell of a lot of fun to play as. I think I'm going to try to start doing some more Fallout RimWorld content on the channel, as well as probably just some Fallout content in general. We recently did a poll and it looks like you guys are pretty interested in that, so I'm hoping this one does well as the future ones, of course. That being said, be sure to like, subscribe, all that same junk everybody else asked for. I'd really appreciate it. And of course, I love you guys ever so much, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.